Good evening, everyone. It is April 12th, and I'd like to welcome you to Welcome to We Show. My name is Robert Levine. I'm the editor-in-chief of Trends magazine. A big hello to our founder of We, Rick Olphick, who cannot be with us today. So, as you know, We is an organization that unites and amplifies the efforts of people, organizations, and global movements working for the common good, working to turn from me to we. Before we begin, though, I'd like to bring attention. I am from New York. I am speaking from New York, and we had a tragic event in the city today. A gunman opened fire in a subway station. Fortunately, there have been no fatalities, but I believe up to 13 people were wounded, some critically. And we all send them the best for their well-being and healing. But it's endemic of violence in the world, violence both on the local level as well as on the national and the international level. And that will lead to our first segment today. So, as we are all aware, on February 24th, Russia invaded the Ukraine. The war has been ongoing, and there have been higher and higher levels of violence and terror as the days progress. So that's why I'm very thrilled we have the two gentlemen here today who both also wrote articles for the most recent issue of Trends. I'd like to introduce John Raymer, as well as Jonathan Granoff, both good friends and partners of We the World. So John, I'd like to start with you, especially what's been going on in the Ukraine has been both frightening, but also very encouraging. We see the world uniting around the people of the Ukraine, and they are uniting against the government of Russia, not the people of Russia, but against the autocratic government of Vladimir Putin and his forces. So if you could speak a little bit about the wonderful things that are going on in the world, people joining together to support the people of the Ukraine.
Right. This is really different. Just the sheer number of people in Ukraine who have these devices, these phones, and they have the high-speed bandwidth to record. It has brought an authenticity to the images and the videos of what's happening there that has brought people onto the field in a whole different way. And watching Zelensky everywhere on Zoom, and there's a different medium in which this battle is unfolding. And of course, it's like it was just before it happened, still these questions about who do you believe, and these narratives and counter narratives, and the way propaganda is being used and has been used. For all of us, we have to clarify, who do we really believe here? What is going on? But we know that somebody with nuclear weapons is not happy, and for some reason concluded that the way to resolve the fears that they had were to invade Ukraine, and this is insane. We've got to stop choosing war. And the potential for us to do it at this time, I think, has never been greater, because the horror has never been more vivid, and the risks have never been greater. So it's great you got people like Jonathan here who, understand the global security issues. And he's written about, in fact, there was a piece that I'm going to show you what we've been doing, how we are trying to weave all the wisdom together. But David Stewart and Jonathan wrote a piece on Putin's nuclear risk that can't be ignored here. And I only point to Jonathan because he's brilliant and he's here right now. But there's a lot of wisdom being shared. I'm just going to show you on my screen here. As a result of the community at large, people have been posting on this, it's called a Trello board, right? Mm-hmm. Here you see these columns, different topics, whether it's philanthropy or medical needs or basic human needs, Like here, these two students from Harvard set up this Ukraine Take Shelter, where people all over the world are saying, "Hey, I got a bed, I got a room." Women and children's issue, nuclear risk assessment. That's where the article that Jonathan wrote is here. You can get to the article and you can learn more about it and engage with each other around it. There's amazing things happening. One that I just want to call attention to is what's happening with Nina Meyerhoff in the Ukraine refugees coming to stay at this house of hope in Auschwitz. It's unbelievable. It started with these teddy bears, and together we've been raising a ton of money in support of these initiatives. One thing this morning, I don't know if people know about, there was a gathering of faith in unity. It was incredible this morning, Faith in Ukraine, where the Pope brought a message. You had all this live stream coming out of Ukraine. And the reason why I'm just pointing to this is that you can't keep up. There's so much going on. But we have a new medium here, and we intend to use Zoom to connect people directly with people who are seeking help and support. It's a kind of digital diplomacy, a peer-to-peer, self-organizing solidarity movement to not only end the insane outcome of this war, but all wars of this time. And let's use this moment to address the potential we have as a collective body to take on the biggest challenge of all time. It's kind of like the game is big, this is high game, big risk, but high gain if we could pull this one off. So I look to people like Jonathan and others who have the knowledge. Otto Scharmer, so many voices are saying this is the moment for a great transformation to occur, partly because the risk is so great.
Right, and I think what is really exciting, and you do bring it forth in your article, is the grassroots support for the people of the Ukraine and against war, not only in Western Europe, in the U.S., but also in Russia itself.
And I think that's why these governments are responding, because of the public outcry. That's what's influencing these governments to actually unify. And it's a chance for us to open classroom, learn about democracy and freedom when you're watching people in front of you willing to die for it. It reminds you what's really important here. This is a unifying moment. And let me let Jonathan build it from here. But I'm so inspired, as you could see, to say, hey, guys, this is what we were born for.
Right. Thank you, John. Jonathan, in Trends, we did include a segment of your statement on the Russian invasion of the Ukraine, where you do address a number of legal, moral, ethical issues. So if you could speak about that.
You'd like me to speak about the legal, moral issues?
Or just your overall impressions and your thoughts on this.
Okay. Well, first, the legal issue is very simple. This is an illegal war. It violates the Charter of the United Nations, which articulates when the use of force by a state against another state is legitimate. And that is only in self-defense. And there was absolutely no threat that Ukraine posed to Russia. And therefore, the war violates the UN Charter. And it's a war of aggression, which all other crimes of war are subsumed in that. Unlike the illegal invasion of Iraq by the United States, this is there was no legal argument coherently put forward by Russia. They just decided to annex a country based on a myth. In Iraq, the United States, unknown to the public, actually wrote a brief. I think it was a pretty weak brief, but it was essentially that the invasion was to fulfill the resolution that brought us the first Gulf War, Desert Storm, which arose legitimate. It was war is a terrible institution, but it was a legal war. The first Gulf War, as you'll recall, was because Iraq had invaded Kuwait, very much the way Russia has invaded Ukraine. And in that instance, John, the world similarly rose up in unison, and there was actually a unified front. And to its credit, the United States worked in a coordinated fashion with dozens upon dozens of countries, and the whole world prosecuted that war. Based on that legal basis, the United States invaded Iraq. That was the legal basis for it. In this instance, there's no legal basis whatsoever. And so it's an affront to the entire fabric of international law, which is necessary for the modern world. It's necessary for commerce, it's necessary for medicine, it's necessary for us to be able to protect the environment, it's necessary to fly airplanes anywhere in the world, it's necessary to protect intellectual property like patents. So it's much more serious than simply a normal war, which is a horrific institution. The other point I'd like to make is that there have been several horrible wars, much worse than this one actually, much worse, that have taken place in recent times. In Syria, you have at least 350,000 people killed. In Ethiopia, in the Tigray, you have over 500,000 people killed. In Darfur, Sudan, at least 300,000 people killed. And these are countries that are in much less of a capacity for the innocent to survive. So the very fabric of these societies has been annihilated and will take years to come back. And right now, there are bombs being dropped in Yemen with made in the United States on them because out of greed, we have been, and our addiction to fossil fuel, we've provided Saudi Arabia with the ability to do this. Now, what's unique about Ukraine and why it's so important? Several reasons. One is the reasoning that Putin put forward in the war, which actually began in 2014 with the invasion of Crimea, a part of Ukraine, was that there is ethnic, linguistic, and religious unity with the population of Russia. So in the first debates in the Security Council of the United Nations, the ambassador of Kenya gave a presentation that didn't get much coverage except for people that are like wonky, like myself, that look at the infrastructure of how society actually works institutionally by states, concepts that matter. And he pointed out that all the countries in Africa had their borders drawn in Europe without reference to ethnic, religious, linguistic, and cultural and tribal boundaries. So almost all the countries in Africa, in a sense, have populations in bordering countries with tribal, ethnic, religious, and cultural roots in the neighboring country. And if the principle that Russia used to invade the eastern part of Ukraine, which they're claiming should be part of them, and Crimea were to become normative, were to become the accepted practice, well, overnight, the entirety of Africa would be up in flames, as would the Middle East, where the borders there were similarly drawn without reference to tribal, religious, linguistic, cultural boundaries. The other point is that, as John pointed out, this war is very similar to the Vietnam War in that it's in people's homes. It's being covered by the media. I grew up very, very, very a sense of the presence and the horror of the Vietnam War because the mass media covered it. Similarly, because the internet, where this war is being covered, and the horror, the reality of this institution of war is in people's homes. But let me point out that before the United Nations, there was about 500 years of almost perpetual wars in Europe. That Europe is the only place where world wars began. And in the 20th century, 2 world wars began in Europe. So there's a realization in the whole world that if the fabric of Europe goes violent, it becomes a world war very quickly.
Mm.
And a world war in which not just nuclear weapons, and that's my expertise actually, but nuclear weapons are 1930s physics, 1940s technology. The people who design weapons have lots of horrible things sitting on shelves. Look, and they want to use them. And if there's a breakdown on the limitations of international humanitarian law, a breakdown on the civilized norms of international law, those weapons will come off the shelf. And as John points out, this is an end game. So this is a moment in which the spirit of human unity, the spirit of human security, the spirit of acknowledging the sacredness of life, the spirit that brings us the constraints of the rule of law that says you can't do some things, we won't do them. The spirit of human solidarity that crosses boundaries in religious identity and ethnic and tribal loyalties, but says we're all human. That spirit is awakening on the planet. It is the conscience of humanity is condemning this war. And the only time that people are not condemning it is when they don't know about it. So we're not only in a conflict of armies, we're in an epistemic conflict, a conflict of knowing, a conflict of information, a conflict of what's real. I believe I believe that truth always outs in the end. And that's really what's at stake here, is the truth is that without a moral condemnation, this is illegal, this is impractical, this is unsustainable, and it is striking at the very fabric of the world order. And so people of conscience, people of good spirit are stepping up, and many are now saying the institution of war is what we have to address, especially people who've looked at how we got into this, because the West, it doesn't have completely clean hands. Mm-hmm. We expanded NATO in derogation of promises that were made. We've surrounded Russia with military bases. We have not understood their psychology of victimization arising from many, many invasions. We disregarded their warnings that they were afraid. And as recently as 2007, Putin wanted Russia to join NATO. How different the world would be if instead of punching him in the stomach and pushing him back, we'd embraced him. Again, right. The qualities that make us human of embracing and understanding one another, those have to come to the forefront. And as John pointed out, there's so much evidence that it is. And we who are we the people, right. We're the people that have to stand up together and affirm the power of compassion and love and caring. This is the moment. Everyone's got to grab an oar. And I'm not saying how you grab your oar, but if you go deep in your conscience, I promise you'll find one.
Right. Even just by spreading the word, talking to people, giving information, just being open and discussing these issues, letting people know what is going on in the world.
We can connect directly to the people involved in ways now here's the thing, Jonathan, I don't know. I mean, I was assuming you might see it the same way, maybe not though. I think we're in the Third World War. I mean, Putin has said he's fighting America. This is a proxy situation we're in right now. The reality is that this guy's perception is that we are encroaching and putting at threat Russia, and he's told us again and again. I mean, it's so clear from his perspective. He even said that to the chancellor from Austria that he's in a war with America, and we just haven't admitted it yet. But let's see what it is.
Let's unpack it a little bit even deeper. The head of the Russian Orthodox Church, echoing the kind of nonsense that we hear by the religious conservatives in the United States, has made the argument that the pushback against liberal democracy in Ukraine is actually preventing the Antichrist from taking over the world, because the freedom to express yourself sexually as you might want to, the freedom to be strange and weird and the way many of us are, the freedom to be creative, the freedom to find your own way to understand God, the freedom of ideas, the freedom of expression. They see that as decadence, and because it's out of control. And if you look carefully at the language, it looks very much like the language of the religious fanatics in Israel, the religious fanatics in Thailand, the Buddhist religious fanatics, the bhikkhus in Sri Lanka who propounded genocide against the Tamils, the religious fanatics in India who back the party in power right now, the religious fanatics in the United States who want the United States to be a Christian national country. The same kind of language, the same kind of dynamic between the quest of freedom, the quest of human unity, the quest of tolerance, the quest of expressions of love, and the quest for domination. And I agree, it's deeper than even just a conflict between one nation and the rest of the world. It is a global conflict right now between two models of human organization, between freedom and creativity and domination. Not only domination of human beings, but the domination of the attempt to dominate nature, to treat nature as property, only property. Oddly enough, you find that people who assert the right to life and are fanatic about abortion, against abortion in the United States, they don't really care about once someone's born, and they don't really care about the environment. Why? Because what they're really about is the assertion of domination over others. And they view God as sort of like a prison warden with a clipboard. Did you do this? Did you do this? And my organization, my church, my state, my religion, we're the clipboard guys in this world on behalf of God, and we're going to keep you in line. And that vision is now being propounded openly in Russia by the church, openly in many parts of America. And that's deeper, that's even deeper.
So Rianne Eisler wrote a piece called "Why Many Republicans Are Putin's Team." That's exactly what you said, because it is this domination system, this masculine values of conquest and violence over feminine values. It's this abuse and violence required to keep the hierarchy in place. It's the policing and censoring of stories. It's that kind of dominant. You're exactly right. See, framing it that way for me gives me hope, because it is a global situation. We can't ignore those other wars, Jonathan. You're absolutely right. But this is the chance to really get the frame right and realize.
I don't agree with your framing it as masculine, feminine. I don't see that the pursuit of domination is masculine at all. I think it's ignorance.
Values. She says the rigid binary gender stereotypes, that this idea of abuse and violence to impose hierarchies, and the idea of censoring, and that kind of top-down rule, which is the traditional punitive male-dominated family. That is the tradition. A lot more wars have been started by men than how many women have started wars, Jonathan? You're a professor of history. You know how many.
I was a child development major at Vassar, which was a women's college mainly when I went there, and I studied child development, and the seeds of violence are implanted very early. The seeds of distorted identity are planted very early. And those seeds of ignorant, distorted identity are just as, and ignorance is seems to me to be gender neutral. And I don't like anything that isn't accurate, really accurate. It's the ignorance of misidentity is the problem, not gender. And it's not masculine to try and dominate others. The proper masculine expression is to utilize strength to protect, strength to create unity, strength to create justice, strength to ensure the capacity for love. And so I go back to like the early misidentification with tribe, religion, rather than our common human qualities. And in instances in which those predominate in a culture, in which children are raised to know that they belong, that they're not shamed into behavior, that they're not manipulated and dehumanized, violence diminishes.
Okay,
And it even goes right up to government. Like, there are governments in the world that don't even have militaries. And it was men that got rid of the militaries. It was, Papa Figueros who got rid of the military. So I don't accept that this is I don't accept it as male female. I think it's ignorance wisdom.
Okay, so we're unfortunately going to have to wrap this up. John, do you want to say one more thing before we move on?
May peace prevail on earth. May we find a way to care better for the concerns that motivated these people to do these horrendous things, and find really some way to create the kind of future together that works for everybody. I mean, my heart breaks for everyone, and I hope that the domination systems are actually able to be thwarted here, and we find peace. And I love you, Jonathan. Thanks for sharing your wisdom.
And John, the pursuit of domination, of wanting to dominate or be dominated, is no fun.
Oh, I agree. It must be a better thing to be doing with Putin than.
Yeah, there must be some. The people who buy into that, they don't have any fun. And that to me is one of the great services that you provide for lots of people, which is getting, if you look at like Desmond Tutu,
Right.
Right? He took down apartheid with an embrace of love and a smile. And that's the model we have to have.
Oh.
That's the transcendent model of today, in my opinion.
That changed the game. I totally agree. Let's do
Thank
it.
you both.
Thank you.
Thank you both very much. Thank you for all the work you do with We. Thank you for being here this evening. Thank you for your words and your wisdom.
Our pleasure.
Take good care. So this issue of trends, we highlighted International Women's Month as well as the month of the environment. So I'm happy tonight that we have our environmental coordinator, Sue Blythe, because one of the major issues we face is global warming, climate change, a world in crisis. And Sue is doing wonderful work at the local level, showing us that the local is indeed global. So Sue.
Thank you so much, Robert. And thank you both, John and Jonathan, for setting the stage for the fun and the games and the lightness and the laughter that I want our children to grow up with as we work toward this sustainable, just, and peaceful future that we all want to see. So I'd like to invite my friends Josh Franklin and Grace Hendricks to come on, share your videos. Let me get my gallery view here. Okay, and so I am Grandma Sue Blythe, and I'm with the Climate Collaboratory and the We, which is a pilot project of We the World, and a growing network of collaborators, including the interfaith climate group. So what we're trying to do is bring a little bit of a spiritual element of unity into this whole conversation. And so what I'd like to do is share my screen and start the show. Grace and Josh are here from the Star Center Theater, and we have a little story to tell you. So welcome to the Climate Collaboratory. We're on the road to 2030, 2050, and beyond. And our friends Pacha and Paco are making a video for our collaborative storytelling adventure, and they need some help. So we're inviting people of all ages to help build a world that works for 100% of humanity and the community of life on Earth's our home. Today, our story takes us to 200 miles in space, circling the human race. Let's see what happens. Paco, you got your script there?
I'm sorry, could you give me one second? I apologize.
Okay. Ah. So Paco is going to be making a video, and he's saying, okay, Pacha, go ahead and tell us about, show us the scene with the ocean and the mountains and the stars.
Okay, the script is loading. I apologize.
Okay, and Pacha says, wakes up in her room in the Climate Collaboratory, and she hears, "Burr, burr, attention, attention, emergency, emergency, all hands on deck." And she goes to the deck and she sees all these screens on the on, on the main deck, and it's code red for humanity, and the earth is getting way too warm. It's going up to 3.6 degrees. Pacha, are you with us? That's way too warm, isn't it? But it sure does look beautiful up here. How is it that the humans are making such trouble for this earth?
Okay, I got it up
I'm
and
going
running now.
backwards
I
now.
apologize.
Okay.
Okay,
No, can you take us to the code red for humanity?
yes, ma'am. I apologize. Code red.
Yeah, let's keep going. Grace, are you with us for the breathing in and breathing out?
Yeah.
Okay.
Attention, attention. It's
Now,
code red for humanity.
Josh, well, let's go back. Okay, go ahead.
From right there.
Go ahead. Yep,
Okay.
right there.
Attention, attention. It's code red for humanity. The planet is getting way too warm. And we need a scene right here. The climate action simulator shows the Earth's temperature increasing by 3.6 degrees.
Oh no, that's way too warm, isn't it?
For sure. But that's where we're headed with business as usual. We've got some changes to make, and fast.
The planet looks so beautiful from up here. It's hard to believe that people could damage it.
We'll need someone who can tell this part of the story using real climate science.
We'll find them. But let's not worry about that now. Let's keep going.
Well, I do worry about it now. What am I supposed to show in my movie?
I don't know. Let me ask Born in a Cloud. She'll know.
Born in a cloud?
The wise grandmother. I talk to her all the time. You can dream her up right now. Breathing in, breathing out. Thinking of the wise elder born in a cloud of smoke. Breathing in and out. Feeling your heart warming, bringing her close on the web of love. Breathing in and out. Though we can't see or hear her, she speaks to us clearly so we know.
What do you mean we can't see or hear her? We have to see and hear her for our movie.
Well, all right. For starters, we'll bring her in so we can all see and hear her. Sooner or later, though, she has to become that small, still voice we all have within us.
Fine, but you know me. I have to see it to believe it. So show me now. Ready? Born in the cloud, take 2.
Breathing in, breathing out. Thinking of the wise elder born in a cloud of smoke. Breathing in and out. Feeling the heart warm, bringing her close on the web of love. Breathing in and out. You can see and hear her. She appears to us clearly so we know she is near.
Can you hear me now? Can you see me now?
We can.
We really can.
Okay. And I'm sorry, I don't have my script in front, so I'm going to stop there. And we are going to say, sorry, folks, we're still in rehearsal, but we are getting there. And thank you, Josh and Grace, for being with us and helping with this show. So what I want to do is just say, what are your feelings? Let me pull this up, sorry. Let me breathe deep here. Okay, so we are telling this story day by day. In Climate Collaboratory, the musical, we're telling the story of how we come to live together as one human family and one Earth community with a common destiny. And so Josh and Grace are here from the Star Center Theater. And Grace, you and your generation are growing up in a changing climate. And what does that mean to you?
Well, what it means to me is basically, for me, the weather is changing a lot. There are a lot more storms, and it was 80 degrees in the middle of winter, and it's also affecting food supply in many ways.
Yeah. And Josh, when you think about what's happening to all the living things on our planet, what do you feel and what do you want to do?
When I think about all the living things on our planet, first thing that comes to mind is deforestation and how it's a lot of trees that are being cut down for buildings and factories, and it's taken away from the natural habitat of wildlife. And not only that, it's also shortening our supply of oxygen because we get our oxygen from trees. So I feel like what we could do is plant more trees, or at least try to limit the amount of trees that are being cut down.
Awesome. And so we are living in a time of change. And we're here in Alachua County, Florida, where our city and our county have both declared a climate emergency. It's going to take all of us working together to make a world that works for all. Our musical play is the centerpiece of a community-wide climate conversation to action program with We the World, the Interfaith Climate Group, and a growing network of climate collaborators. And we use the Earth Charter as a guide. And it says, every individual, family, organization, and community has a vital role to play. The arts, sciences, religions, educational institutions, media, businesses, non-governmental organizations, and governments are all called to offer creative leadership. And the partnership of government, civil society, and business is essential for effective governments. So that's what we're trying to do, is bring all those people together and ask, what can we do together that we can't do on our own? Some say it'll take a miracle to make the changes we need. I believe in the power of unity, and I know plenty of adults and elders who are here to help make these young people and their generation to make the change they want to see in the world. So Grace, I wonder, what would you say to other kids your age about taking part in this change?
Well, so some kids my age, even if they don't have a lot of time, like they're busy with schoolwork or clubs or all of that, there are a lot of small things you can do that make a big difference, such as using less plastic or less water and even turning off the lights when no one's in the room.
Good. And how about you, Josh? What would you say to other kids your age?
Me personally, I feel like I would tell other kids my age to I feel like I would tell them to, the usual recyclables, trash, but also to not litter. Because I know a lot of times they don't see somebody around, they'll just decide, oh, I'm just gonna throw it on the ground real quick. Nobody's gonna know. So I encourage them not to litter. And if they see somebody littering or if they see trash on the ground, I would encourage them to pick it up, not just let it stay there.
Okay, thanks. So tell me, you're both with the Star Center Theater, and I wonder if you can share some of your thoughts about how it is for you as a theater person to try to tell this story. Josh?
I actually like talking about this. Me being a theater person, being able to tell this, I feel like me personally, I feel like we could get the I really don't know the word to say it, but we could get the point across better because we could do it in a theatrical version, which would cause more people to come, show up. Obviously we won't like just have it like completely informative. It'll also be some funny parts in it. So you want to draw the listeners in. So I feel like me being a theatrical person, I feel like we could, being in the theater, you could gather more people together and they will be more receptive to the information because it's in the form of a play.
Okay. And how about you, Grace?
Really, what I was going to say is a lot what Josh said. Like, when it's in the form of a play, people might enjoy it, they might listen more, and it helps, like Josh said, get the point across. And you can, like younger kids, they might not focus on reports because they have a short attention span, while as a play, they might enjoy that more. So you can get people of all ages to come and hear about climate change.
Okay. Thank you. So what we're trying to do, Robert, is make a story that works for all of our community in Alachua County, Florida. It's a demonstration of how our collaborative storytelling adventure, we can make it so simple a child can understand and participate in the climate conversation and making the changes that we want to see in the world.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you, Grace. Thank you, Josh. This is really wonderful. I'm so glad you could be with us this evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And bye. And I think this is a perfect lead into our next guest. So I think something that's common to what Jonathan, John, and Sue, you, Grace, and Josh spoke to was the power of empathy. Empathy to help us understand our relation to each other on a global level. In the case of the war, not only in the Ukraine, but to war and issues of justice throughout the world, as well as the climate, how it's impacting us and each other. So it's the power of empathy that's especially comes through when one acts. Just as a confession, I'm also an actor. And one way I come to really understand where another person's coming from is if you become them, if you act in their place, if you take on that role. And so that's why I'm especially proud to invite Chris Scott to join us this evening. Chris is a director, actor. He's my acting teacher as well, but I'm asking him because of the valuable work he does as a director in theater in New York. He's also a teacher at the Baruch College working with young people. So Chris, if we can get you up on the screen. How you doing this evening?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Fine, thank you. So thank you for joining us. I know you are in rehearsals right now.
I actually have a presentation going on while I'm playing hooky. I snuck away and I was able to come talk with you.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So I just completed a book about the method, about Stanislavski and the method, and they speak about the magic if. So if you could speak to that and the role it plays in helping us develop empathy.
Yeah, so the magic if, especially above, you go back to the beginning of the inception of what is called the method or method acting. And it all came about the same time that there was this move in literature from romanticism to realism. And Stanislavski, being a director, was interested in the internal life of a character, and that's how one started to build a character. And it's one of his famous books, An Actor Prepares, and of course, one about building character. So we started that this step, and sometimes it's hard to define, but the magic if is basically how would I feel if I were, a mermaid living on a desert island? Just all these things that can get your imagination going. But, I chose something very out there, but basically it's asking yourself the question, how would I feel? What would my life be if these circumstances, because in acting, what we want to do is we want to behave truthfully in imaginary circumstances, asking ourselves to step into that world. So that's kind of basically what the magic if is. And I guess a lot of times we refer to it as magic because there's really no explanation about exactly how you do it. But there's ways to start to bring yourself to doing it. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
So I guess this could play a very valuable role for people that are trying to explore social change, trying to have other people understand social change, the situations that others find themselves in. In this
Yeah.
case, people, Ukraine, for instance.
Oh, absolutely. It's interesting. I just was watching on New York One this week. The Irondale Theater Project in Brooklyn has a program they do with the police precincts out there, where they incorporate exercises such as this in role playing and putting not only the civilians in the neighborhood as the police, but the policemen as civilians, getting a greater understanding to what people go through and what they have to deal with. I mean, and exactly the ability to put ourselves in other people's worlds and places and lives gets us to understand and feel not just for them but with them and as them, because the step from sympathy to empathy is feeling as that person does. So yeah, so us thinking about, and basically it's using our own imaginations, our own experiences, to use this as a key to get inside ourselves and other people's lives and not judge them, but look at their world, which becomes your world at the same time. So I think that could absolutely help us understand each other.
Mhm. Did you have an experience with your students where they took on a role that maybe changed how they viewed things, how they viewed an issue?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of times. I also work with a theater company I've worked with for a long time, Amos Musical Theater, which since 1968 has been sort of in the forefront of equitable casting. And I taught a program there that deals with that teaches youth, high school age students. And I remember we did a production of On the Town, and it was interesting watching these young people go back to a time, it's New York, World War II, understanding the position of women, how women had to sort of move into men's roles, what the experiences of sailors were like going into war, being on the precipice of having to leave to go to battle. So that was kind of one of the first sort of lights that went on for me in getting my students to live that experience in history through the use of acting and performing and display. And also, most recently, I had worked on a play about the AIDS crisis. We were rehearsing The Normal Heart, and then another play called As Is. And many of my students had no idea, and we're talking about a couple of years ago, and these are students in their 20s, what that world was like, what people went through, and understanding what these living human beings were dealing with and the import of it. So watching the lights go on, for lack of a better word, their connection to having to put themselves into a place where your life is threatened. You are dealing with, disease, prejudice, all these things that come along with that time period. So it becomes really valuable for an individual's growth to think outside of themselves, outside this world here, and put themselves into another's situation. So watching them gain this knowledge and become, I think, more caring and patient people.
Right. So it gives them an opportunity to really examine their own humanity in a sense.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's the thing that that I emphasize when we're working, and it's to look at yourself first of all, warts and all, everything. You just don't have to concentrate on what's good. You have to accept what your flaws are as well, and that way you can look at people as these beautifully imperfect things, as I always like to say, because that's what makes us all individuals, are these slight imperfections and different things that come from our shared and individual experiences.
Right. And maybe even we start to understand what we have in common, basically.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I think that is probably the biggest takeaway is people start to realize that we are have so much more in common than we realize, that these trappings around us are just that. They're just things and not feelings and people and souls and stuff like that. I read somewhere where, I don't remember who said it, but our emotions, even back, through the centuries, emotions really stay the same. It's the technology around us that changes. So we do, realize that we do have more in common when we start to take away the outer trappings and bring it down to basically who we are. Who am I? What do I know about this situation? What can I understand here? And that's a key into understanding more about someone else's life.
Right. And even in the case of the current war, that somebody who lived through a war 500, 600 years ago, I'm sure the experience that they have is similar to the one people are having now, the degree of suffering, the hardship, the loss.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You suddenly realize that hurt, anger, fear, all these things, joy is the same, but especially when we're talking about the war, any kind of war, there is uncertainty, which leads to fear and the unknown. So I think that gets amplified, and our ability to reach out to those people.
Okay. If there's anything else you'd like to add before we sum up, Chris?
No, I think it's an amazing tool, and when I work on it, it's interesting that a lot of it when we do some of these exercises, students say, "Oh, a lot of this is like meditation," and in some ways it is, because you start to peel away tension and things that are holding you in and let you relax and concentrate, so you're able to willingly go into another person's situation. So I think these are really useful tools that if we take the time and slow down and give a moment to understand other people, I think put ourselves there, it would help us a great deal. And I've watched it change people.
Wow, thank you so much. I so appreciate your joining us today and for the article that you wrote for us in Trends.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, and thank you for asking me to write it. Really enjoyed it.
Okay, thanks and have a good evening.
All right, you too. Take care.
So I just want to, bring an end to the show. I want to thank everyone, to thank Jonathan, John, Sue. I know that Grace left, but to thank Grace, Josh, and Chris. And of course, as always, to thank Angel Fullerton, who is our producer, who basically handles the tech, who helps us make things move along very smoothly. Angel, a big thank you. I really, your efforts, the work you do is really valued and really appreciated.
Thank you, Robert.
And so that's the conclusion of this month's Welcome to We Show. Please join us again when we'll be back here. Also want to, of course, always thank the founder of We, the inspiration behind so much of what we do here, Rick Ulfick, who could not be with us today. He was a host of this show for quite a while, and I'm very grateful that he's asked me to fill in for him at this time. So I want to thank you all, thinking of the people in the Ukraine, of the people that are refugees from climate change, the people that are right now going through a horrible experience in the subways of New York after that horrific event, but also to think of the positive work people like Jonathan, John, Sue, Chris are doing to really make this a much better world. So I want to thank everyone and to wish you a good night.